Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. Happy Democracy Day, I may say. Well, I'm Sean Kimbaloye. A special edition of Sunday Politics right here on Channels Television. As today marks a year since President Muhammadu Buhari was sworn in as Nigeria's fourth president of the Fourth Republic. In 1993, he had tremendous goodwill with the public as he welcomed his leadership and the return of the military with the promise of a relentless fight against corruption. After 16 straight years, several years after, of military rule, the soldiers went back to the barracks and handed power to a democratically elected government led by former President Olusegun Obasanjo in 1999. Obasanjo spent 8 years at the helm of affairs and handed over to Umaru Musa Yar'Adua in 2007. And from there on to former President Goodluck Jonathan, who midwifed what could be described as one of the most keenly contested elections in Nigeria's history. 33 years after, President Muhammadu Buhari returns on the wheels of change, the promise of a relentless fight against terror and corruption while reviving the nation's dwindling economy were highlights of the party APC's manifesto. Today, May the 29th, 2016, makes exactly a year since he was sworn into office. Not particularly a great time for the continent's biggest economy, isn't it? Well, that has been hit by a sharp fall in oil prices, blinded by over-reliance on oil, sucked dry by corruption. Unemployment is an all-time high. The nation is also greatly distressed by cases of insecurity in the northeast and the oil-rich Niger Delta. Buhari and his supporters at the campaigns promised Nigerians change. Some of the promises were so enticing as they were made within a 30-day deadline. That's how fast they say they want to perform. But 1 year after, how has the Buhari government fared? Tonight, we continue the conversation and assessment of how the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration has performed, and we shall be focusing on three major areas: security, the economy, and the fight against corruption. Welcome on board. To drive these mini town hall-like conversation, we have a panel and a studio audience. We have a former Minister of Education and also that of Solid Minerals and the administration of former President Olusegun Obasanjo, a former Vice President of the World Bank Africa Division, Dr. Obiageli Ezekwesili. Welcome to the program. Also with us is an economist, the Managing Director of Financial Derivatives. He sits on the board of several companies. Mr. Bismarck Ruwani joins us. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And Mr. Femi Adesina is a special advisor to the President Muhammadu Buhari on media publicity. He was former president of the Guild of Editors and a former chairman of the Sun newspapers. Many thanks for joining us, Mr. Adesina.
Good evening.
Well, we're supposed to be having Professor Akin Oyebode scheduled to be with us here, but he is medically indisposed. We wish him quick health. We also have our studio audience, which includes representatives of political parties, the civil society, and the private sector. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to the program. Do you know that you can be part of the conversation right now? Go on Twitter, hashtag Buhari365days, and the handles there are at CTV Politics and at Channels TV. At the end of the program, of course, we will collate the votes of Nigerians to know how they rate this government. So take a look at how you can vote in these opinion poll. You can call this number 0144 06466 or go to our website, channelstv.com. Joining me is the face you know too well on Channels Television. To analyze some data and information on the issues up for discussion today is Channels Television's data and information analyst, Mr. Babajide Ogunso. Thank you so much, Jide, for coming on the program.
It's always a pleasure, Sean.
All right, we look at, it is a unique day in the life of Nigeria, isn't it? But what does this mean to an average Nigerian or millions of Nigerians on the street out there?
It does mean a lot. Let's cast our mind at where we are today. 3 decades and 16 months ago, 42-year-old Major General Buhari read his first anniversary speech. If you look at where we are today, it becomes only the second man after President Obasanjo in Nigeria's 102-year history to have read a first-year anniversary speech twice. The first time he did it was on January 1st, 1985. Today, it becomes only the second man to have read an anniversary speech 2 times. But Nigerians ask, Is the Nigeria of 1985 the same as the Nigeria of 2016?
That's over 30 years ago.
Is military ruler Buhari the same person as civilian president Buhari? Tonight, we'll get all the answers, and Sean, I think the facts will surprise you.
Some of the issues, this is the Punch newspaper, of course, that we know, and this is the Punch newspaper of what year?
This is the Punch newspaper for 1984. This is exactly what were the headlines 1 year after President Buhari took office in 1983. So it's interesting to look at it. We have MK Abiola here, and the headlines here was "Booze, our #1 enemy." And it's interesting when we look at what the Oxfam International and World Aid reports say about booze and water. They say only 40% of Nigerians have access to clean water in Nigeria. In essence, these headlines that were the headlines in its first year anniversary still represents what we have today and what we see in the country today. And in simple
Situation
terms,
not really changed.
Situation hasn't really changed. What MK Abiola here was saying, if you allow me to demonstrate, is it's easier to get your hands on a cold bottle of beer in Nigeria than to find clean water flowing out from your tap at home.
So 3 years after, this situation still remains. That's what you're saying?
This situation still remains. And even if we look at what the president spoke about today, it seems quite different from what he spoke about in 1985 when he read his first anniversary speech.
What did he say then?
Then he had focused on jobs. He had mentioned jobs and employment 9 times. He had also focused on health, mentioning health in his first year anniversary speech 9 times. And if you can bring up those information so that our viewers at home can quickly catch it. So in his first year anniversary, he clearly had focused on health. And I think that was right, because we cannot have a healthy economy without having a healthy population. And
okay, he spoke about corruption. He mentioned corruption twice in 1985.
He mentioned corruption twice in his first year anniversary speech.
But early this morning at 7 a.m.,
the discussion had changed.
Okay.
He had mentioned corruption 5 times.
Okay, that means it's big for him.
Oh, no, it's certainly big. He had mentioned jobs only once, health only once, and technology and innovation only once. He mentioned Boko Haram twice. There was no mention of terror or Boko Haram in his first year anniversary speech. There was a lot of energy in focusing on the health of the population, and rightly so, about the job and employment situation in the economy, rightly so. And even though corruption was big, it was second priority for him. This time around, we have so many memorable things to compare between 1985 and 2016.
You've got highlights of what some of the things he said then.
Oh, surely. There are 3 most memorable things. Part of it was him asking, saying, and we quote, "We request you, speaking to Nigerians, to also to do your best so that together we can pull our country out of these difficulties." This quote, even though he made it in his first year anniversary speech, is still very relevant. A second memorable quote is when he talked about we paying our debts, and he said, "We are paying our debts and no longer begging anybody." Still very relevant. And for me, my favorite is the last one that says, "I assure you that the government considers public opinion and contribution vital to success." And I think that is the essence of why we're here today. It's all about the opinion of the public.
This interestingly becomes a major one, because we're paying our debts, are no longer begging anybody. We will be financing part of the Nigerian budget of about over 6 trillion naira, and we'll be borrowing about over 1 trillion out of that.
Oh, surely, but the president's body language and his tone today clearly shows that he still wouldn't be begging anybody.
Interesting.
He still wouldn't be begging.
What other things that are notable about this today and 1985 speech?
Fortunately, we have some newspapers, especially the Punch and the Vanguard, that have kept millions of records, and they've allowed us to see exactly what the president did in his first year. In January of 1984, if we have that, we have highlights of exactly what the president has done from January to December. And we can clearly see what he had done here. Perhaps one of the most important things, which we are still experiencing today, is the slash of the BTA from 500 to 100 naira. That had happened in the first month of his military term when he was president. Interestingly as well, we had heard lots of complaints about the president slowly appointing his ministers as civilian presidents.
It took almost 6 months to do that this time around.
Exactly. As military ruler, it took him less than 3 weeks. So it's interesting, and even if we look into...
Perhaps age is a factor here, because, he's 70, over 70 years, and he probably had learned so much experience. Maybe the reason isn't.
Age could be a factor, Sheon, but perhaps the political party is also a factor. Because history tells us, or history told us, that within his first 3 weeks, he had already appointed his ministers. This time around, we see a different Buhari.
All right.
Interesting to see what has happened in the month of February as well. So we can see exactly January 18, he appointed his ministers. In the month of February, lots of interesting things have been happening. We see a lot of religious uprisings, and the president, yes, did visit Yola when the religious uprisings were happening then. In March, we also have something interesting that happened in March. Precisely on March 28th, the president had told the National Council of States to approve 600 million naira for loan for salary arrears for states. So exactly what is happening in his first year as civilian president.
So much to talk about,
happened during his
let's take a pause. And we'll take a moment now. When we go on this short break, a situation where some of these situations that we're seeing over 30 years ago, and we're bringing them back and comparing with today. Well, a situation where about 20 local government areas of this country are under an alien flag can no longer be tolerated. APC is ready to get rid of insecurity in Nigeria. Those are some of the promises of the APC government and Buhari before they came into office. Of course, we focus on security when we return. Stay with us.
I would say on the issue of security, I'll score them 70% because they've tried.
The issue of insurgency has been actually treated satisfactorily because for now there is no single territory of Nigeria which is under insurgency, and that we will not say that the battle is over, but successfully President Buhari has restored peace to especially the northeast part of the country.
All of us were seeking for peace, and luckily enough in this administration we have enjoyed peace. Now, as you all know, as you see, luckily enough too, you as a journalist, you know what is happening in this country, more especially northern part of the country. But now we are enjoying peace.